All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Write Hive 2025. Today we've got for our workshop, Writing to Heal with I Know Why She Stayed. I'm going to let them do all of their own intros. I'm Exit Moon. I'll be here to moderate and keep the unofficial Casey Cracks laughing tally, which we'll report on at the end. But with that, Casey, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Sure. My name is Kasey Rogers, and I laugh a lot. Um, I am part of an organization called I Know Why She Stayed. And our mission is basically to expose the connection between domestic and financial abuse. And I had the wonderful pleasure of meeting my two partners along the way. And we are very determined to provide as much information and a program that we've been developing over the course of the last year and a half to women so they can not they can avoid some of the experiences that we had because we weren't aware of some of the things that we encountered. We didn't have the vocabulary to to speak about it or address it. And so it's my pleasure to pass the mic, so to speak, to my co-founder, Kat.
Hi, I'm KJ Harrowick. I am the one of the co-founders and the chief technology officer for I Know Why She Stayed. All three of us are authors, and we write nonfiction, we write fiction. And one of the things that we've all learned is as we're writing our stories, we're sort of unpacking this trauma that we haven't yet identified within ourselves. So not only are we running I Know Why She Stayed and trying to help women who have suffered domestic and financial abuse, but we're also uncovering some of our own trauma and the things that we've dealt with. And along the way, we've learned that, oh, wait a minute, I was falling apart 2 months ago and I just wrote out all my rage and now I'm fine. Or in my case, I wrote this entire dragon fantasy that was very, very heavily laced with sexual assault. And this was in my early writing years. And what I didn't realize is a lot of my own trauma actually came out in the story because that's what was familiar. You know, the whole write what you know thing, even though you don't know dragons, you do know trauma. So that's a little bit about what we want to unpack today is how to get it out and how to start healing as you're writing, even if you're writing fiction and something that doesn't have to do with the specific thing you're dealing with.
Hi, I'm Justine Manzano. People around here generally know me for Right Hive. I'm on the board and am often very active in the community. I also am a fantasy author and am the director of operations and de facto chaos coordinator for I Know Why She Stayed because I have so much going on. And I learned how to coordinate chaos during that. Um, so in order to keep all my hats on straight, um, I have to know how to handle chaos, right? And in the same way as Kat mentioned, I have I've written about abusive situations that I've been in the past through my books without realizing it, or negative environments that I have been in. They came through my characters, and in a lot of ways, I didn't realize I was doing my own self therapy. I didn't really have the words to explain it. And a lot of what I learned about abuse and how it works into people's lives happened within the last year when I met Casey and Kat. Their program that they started and I have like sort of shoved my way into and am helping with, they really do make it possible to really understand and grasp like those patterns and the words that are needed to really understand what's happened to you and how you can get through it. So yeah, so we became a team and we are still rounding out the final stages of a 4-pillar program that we will be working to distribute to people who have been abused. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
Well, I think one of the things we should probably start off with is language. So You know,
Mhm.
since we're going to talk about writing, we're going to talk about healing. Sometimes it's hard to do if you don't have the language to, like, the specific words to say, this happened to me. So one of the things that happened when Kasey and I were kind of in our early years of our friendship is we started talking about just general stuff, the different things that had happened to us in life. You know, she talked about her husband, I talked about my husband. And as we started talking, I started hearing these words that I'd never really heard before, you know, economic abuse, financial abuse. And I understood domestic abuse, but I didn't understand the money side of it and how it's sort of at the root of a lot of the other things that, you know, kind of the snowflake effect. But as I'm talking to her, I started gaining this language of, oh, wait a minute, this happened to me. I've just had a bad feeling my whole life and things I don't like, things I actively avoid, but I didn't have words to say, oh, somebody took my future away. Or, oh, this person hit me and told me they loved me and it was all my fault. Like, wait a minute, that's not okay. But now I can identify it with the words and with the language. So,
Yeah, I think you hit upon something really important, Kat, in our own lives and the way that we've navigated our experiences, but also what is at the heart of our program is using the memoir. Kat and I both wrote sections of the memoir. Or obviously, I wrote about my experiences, couldn't write about hers, but she wrote about hers and the way that they intersected, the way that we met. And even though our stories were very, very different, how similar they were. But we, again, didn't have the language and the vocabulary to identify our experiences. And this is something that happens over and over again. Like when I first started writing, I didn't really use the word abuse. Using the word abuse was humiliating to me. I couldn't possibly have been abused. I thought I was too educated. I was, you know, a successful business person. I made a lot of money. And how could I be someone who ended up abused? So when you start unpacking all of the experiences that you have and you're able to define it more easily, then it gives you the possibility to heal because you can identify with other people's experiences as well. And that's what we did with the work that I Know Why She Stayed is involved in. We give people like not only the vocabulary to address their experiences, but we help them through our experiences say, hey, look, you're not the only one that this has happened to. It's okay. We survived. You can survive too. And we can tell you how we managed to move forward in our life.
And I feel like one of the things that we have learned in unpacking all of that is that abusive language and behavior is pretty much what we've learned when it comes to the use of abusive language and abusive behavior, is that while everybody who is abused is different, there is no set, you know, form of person. There is no gender. There is no socioeconomic status that you can't avoid. If it happens to you, it happens to you. It's not something that happens to a certain demographic. But it always seems to be the same tactics, the same language, the
Mm-hmm.
same person, pretty much,
Same.
from the top of the ladder
Mm-hmm.
to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
They are all using the same tactics and the
Mm-hmm.
same way of manipulating.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've done when we did the the reader's guide that we worked on, is that we took pieces of Kasey's story and Kat's story, and we pulled out that language. We pulled out quotes that showed, look, this is an example of manipulation. This is an example of coercive control. Because sometimes language, sometimes living in the scene and telling the story, which is why writing to heal is so important, someone else reading that can go, oh, never realized that was an example of this before. That's happened to me. And it's so important to see, for people who have been through things like this, to see themselves reflected in it, because then they can pull that out and kind of go, okay, I have had this experience, and I can relate. And how did Kat get out of that? How did Kasey get out of that situation? So that's one of the things that we were doing, and one of the things that I feel like was probably somewhat easier for me to do than Kasey and Kat, was to go into their memoir, dive in there and yank out quotes and analyze things, and just sort of like, this is, there are times Kasey told me that in her memoir, there are points where she now knew that this was coming. But if you look at it, you can see very early on these signs in the story that at the time you don't realize are signs that are just pointing like big flashing arrows towards an abusive relationship. Experiencing that, you wouldn't see it because it's one isolated incident at a time, another isolated incident at a time, but it's like steps when it's laid out like that. And so these things, like, they, clarifying that and kind of like pulling them out and putting them separate and saying, look, this is manipulation. It, using the direct language to describe it, helps so much in people who have experience and aren't ready to accept it yet, to be able to digest it.
All this beautiful language we're talking about. So the interesting thing is, we're here to write to heal, but that doesn't, like, the memoir and the reader's guide and all of the other segments that we're building right now are all nonfiction in a way, and but Justine and I, and Kasey writes historical fiction. Justine and I write fantasy and science fiction. And all of us have learned that without knowing that language, we still put our trauma in our stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things is, as you're stepping into, okay, how can I heal? You don't have to go, oh, I've got to write a nonfiction, or I need to write a memoir because that's how I'm going to heal. No, you don't. You can write dragons in space.
Right.
And that trauma is still going to come out of you with every single word. And the more language you have in your arsenal about what you went through, that's going to help you refine it. But even if you don't have the language, somehow it always slips out. It comes out. And then when you understand the language, you're like, oh man, I messed up.
Oh my gosh, the number of times I think that, like, people have been like, oh, that part was dark of my story. I'm like, yeah, it's not as cute in sunshine and rainbows up here as it is. It looks very cute in sunshine and rainbows. It's not like that inside.
Yeah. I had that experience when I was writing The Color of Frost, because I started writing that almost immediately after I finished writing the memoir. And my character, even though she's kind of different than who I am, in terms of age and everything else, somebody said in a workshop that I was doing, oh, you're just writing your memoir, a fictional character. And it's like all the same themes that are in my real life got transferred into this character. And her experiences were based on a lot of things that I just felt had to come to the surface for me to understand. And Kat was talking about rage writing. The rage that I was able to express in a fiction character was really beneficial to me, because this way I didn't have to reveal some of the darker things that I didn't want to put in the memoir because they were just too personal, but I was able to express them through the fictional character. So writing to heal really does work. It's very, very therapeutic. Um, so that's why we developed the program the way that we did, to give people the opportunity to understand how healing. I always tell this story about when my husband passed away, and he was also the person that financially abused me and abused me in other ways. And I used to have nightmares all the time. Not that he died, but that he came back to life, zombie. And it was almost the same nightmare all the time. He was back. He was living with my kids and he wasn't contributing, and he really didn't care about our well-being. And as soon as I finished writing the memoir, I realized that I stopped having the nightmares. And that was like one of the things that just made me realize that I had done like a year of therapy writing this memoir.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the nightmares, because a few years ago, gosh, I guess it's been about 5 years, I got diagnosed with seizures. I started having seizures just out of the blue. And I would never pass out. I was always fully awake, fully conscious, and they would last anywhere from 2 minutes to 30 minutes. And to me, that's a terrifying thing, because they're not supposed to last that long. And what I found out is I don't have any kind of epilepsy, but I've got enough trauma that I kept trying to bury and hide because I wasn't ready to face it. I kept telling myself that I'm going to be just fine. And if I have to start packing into this and unraveling it, I'm going to become an entirely different person. And I finally made peace kind of with who I am. And I didn't want to unravel that and then suddenly be this unrecognizable troll again. I don't know who I am. And some of the seizures are from migraines, but some of them are very much trauma induced. And I know that because I got in a big fight with somebody a couple of years ago, and after the fight, my head hurt for 2 days and the seizures worsened. They got so bad I couldn't get up. But the interesting thing is it was Kasey that finally said, look, write your story, just a little bit. You don't have to write the whole thing, because there's a lot in there that would take me decades to unpack. She goes, let's just focus on this bit, the financial abuse. Let's see what comes of it. Because I want to kind of, we had talked about compiling both stories into the memoir to kind of give a broader view, but give, men and women out there and people just this chance to go, abuse isn't always from one spouse to another or partner to partner. It can be from parent to child. It can be from caregiver to elderly. It can be all kinds of methods. And
Or family members.
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
by then Justine was on board and I started writing, and sure enough, 90% of it was all sexual assault when it came out. And I'm like, this is not what I want to write about. It was rage against my father. This wasn't what I wanted to write about. And poor Justine and Kasey had to see me go from totally stable with cracks on the edges to completely melting down almost daily. I would call them in tears. I would be frustrated. I didn't want to do this anymore. And by the time I got through the second revision, it started to look like a story. And I started to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
My seizures toned down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm off medication now because I don't have health care. But so I have to manage in other ways. But this is one of the ways that's helping, is writing about this stuff, learning the language, getting that rage out of me that I've had buried for so long. And the rage isn't who I am, but it's in there and it festers and it comes out in weird ways. And it just, there's a healing component. All of us suffer from something going on with our health. And so most of the time, doctors can't even identify what it is, but sometimes it's just trauma. We just have to talk about it. We have to understand what happened to us, not why, because trying to understand an abuser is just a whole other ball of worms you don't want to get into. I guess understanding why you perceived things a certain way, not why these things happened to you, but kind of how you came out of it, your daily life anymore. Little odd habits are trauma induced.
Mm-hmm.
I love to be alone. I could spend 3 days completely by myself, no animals, no humans, and I would be perfectly content. That's a trauma response. So from being abandoned and isolated a lot in my childhood. So it's writing, and not just writing. There's a lot of expressions that people can use to sort of get that rage, that fear, all that achiness that we feel that we're trying to understand and why we have tics and habits and stuff. It's just, it really does help, even if it's just little bits at a time.
It's like bringing back some joy into your life. It's like, yes, it's the rage writing, and you kind of like have this sense of freedom after you get it out of your system. Like another thing that Kat, Justine, and I have talked about, I've told them very often that when I sat down to write the memoir, originally it was like during COVID, I was getting my master's degree. And if you're a writer, you know that a goal is maybe 2,000 to 3,000 words in a day. That's a good day of writing. I sat down and I wrote 30,000 words. I just,
Ouch.
I got it out. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop because, like, the events in my life, I had shoved them aside for so long. I, like started to go through my journals. I started to go through old emails that I had. And there were things that I had buried so deep that were really traumatic, but I didn't have, like we started, I didn't have the language to express it. So there were times that I was just writing swear words on a page in big letters and in small letters. It's like I kind of wish I kept it. I ended up burning everything because it was almost reliving some of the things, just going back. But it was just like this experience of just getting it out of my system, and I felt so much better. Now at that point I still wasn't calling it abuse. I still didn't understand the mindset of the person who was someone I was married to for 25 years, and how coercive control rolls out in a marriage, how you can experience somebody trying to gaslight you or manipulate you, or just screw with your self-esteem. Like I used to be I used to work in the film industry. I used to have to deal with all kinds of high profile people doing contracts and negotiations and stuff, and by the time my marriage ended, I was just a shell of myself. So getting it all out after burying it for so long was just the most amazing experience, because I just felt like I was Linda Blair and there was an exorcist or something, just all, you know, just, it was just all there. So yeah, I can't say enough about the therapeutic nature of what we've all experienced, and how even if you're not writing nonfiction, even pouring all of the things that happen to you into characters or poetry or art or music, lyrics, anything that helps you turn your negative experiences into something that you're expressing those feelings and those thoughts, so they don't live in your mind, and almost more importantly in your body. Because like what Kat said, is there are so many correlations between the stress that we experience as victims of abuse, and they just live in our bodies, and until we get them out, we're not able to heal physically as well as emotionally. So yeah.
So I have been I had been working with I Know Why She Stayed for a couple of months, and I sent Kasey a short story that I had written years ago because I had a close family member who had struggled with domestic abuse, and my rage write wasn't uplifting. It didn't turn out to be something that was very like I wasn't trying to make anyone feel better about this situation. I wrote a short story that I actually give away for free if you sign up for my newsletter, in case you're curious. Um, but it was literally about, well, I don't want to say exactly, but it is about a domestic relationship, and it does get avenged. So we'll just leave that there. And Rage wrote that because I was sick of watching someone that I cared about be tortured. And that was my violent outburst. Now, was it probably the most positive thing? No. Did it make me feel better though? Fuck yeah, it did. I was pissed. I was tired, and I was worried. And I like the idea of being able to step in and end that for that person felt like a good story to tell for me. And sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's not always going to be something you write that's this uplifting, like beautiful piece of work that talks about how you're going to recover and you're going to make it through. Sometimes it's pure rage, right? It's no, that wasn't fair. I'm bad. I'm sorry, my language. But I'm always the one. But yeah, like that wasn't fair. That wasn't something anyone should have had to go through. And you have a right to be angry, and you have a right to want to take that back. And it's not the only time that I have gone into rage mode about abusive family members or parents or, in stories. And sometimes I think it's necessary, because I think, especially me, because I write for young adults largely, I think there's danger in acting like every story is only uplifting, or that dismissing that rage, dismissing the fear and the anger that comes with it. I think that should definitely be addressed. I think, yes, I want that person to recover. I want to, or at least to show that there's light at the end and they can get through it. But I think that there is danger in pushing that part aside. So I'm always very big on writing out that anger, writing that rage, acknowledging it's there, developing through that, yes, but never to like sugarcoat anything or make it seem like this is something, oh, that thing they say that drives me crazy. Oh, you had to go through what you went to be stronger, or everything happens for a reason. That's why you're doing what you're doing. You had to go through what you went through so that you could help develop this program to help people. Yeah, I'd really rather not have. I mean, this is really great, but having to talk through experience about things like this sucks. I wish I didn't have to have the experience to be able to do it. However, if I was going to be touched by this, I'm going to try to pass it on into something good and positive for other people. But yeah, like I think there's a lot of danger in that. Like, what is it they call it now? It's toxic hope, or where it's toxic positivity. Not everything is a great feeling. Not everything happens for a good reason. Things suck.
Yeah.
And you grow from them. Yeah. But it's not always, it's not always positive to grow that way.
Yeah.
Like, so I was a tough girl growing up. I went through a lot of experiences early on that nobody should have. It was very tough. There were times where I saw that my son growing up was very sensitive, and I would go, wish he was stronger. Like, I wish he was tougher going out into situations, because to me, it was easier to deal with some of the lesser curveballs because of that. However, how did I become that way? And when I thought about it, I was like, no, I don't wish it. I don't. I had to like second guess that, because I'm like, he's not, because he trusts people, because hasn't experienced any of those horrible things, and so he hasn't grown into that. And that is really what you want to do when you're putting yourself out there, saying, this is what I went through. And if obviously nobody has to publicize or publish these rage thoughts or these their experiences. That's not a requirement in writing to heal. It doesn't have to get into the world. These can be private writings. I just tend to do it. But when I'm putting myself out there, or I'm putting together, things for I Know Why She Stayed, and putting that out into the world, all of those things are there in the hopes that not that someone else doesn't have to get tough learning that way, that they can
Right.
learn it by reading what we wrote, and then
Right.
in so doing, hopefully avoid that situation,
Mhm.
see the red flags as on the way.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
talked about something, toxic positivity, and it made me think of very specific genres of stories that are loved, absolutely loved. But I think a lot of times they end up in that danger zone because, when they say, write what you know, or you're just writing because this is what you want to see. This is the type of romance you want to see, or this is the type of situation you want to see in your book. And all of a sudden it's like, I think a lot of times you don't realize you write these things because they're familiar. Um, I'll be honest, I kind of merged from science fiction and fantasy into romantic scenarios, and I've looked back over my stuff and I'm like, oh my, I wrote the alpha male that's an asshole and thinking it's a good thing because there's this mixture of love and fear. Um, that especially abusers use it, or people who like to manipulate, who like to gaslight. They grow up not understanding that these are two separate emotions. So all of a sudden you're hearing the words, I'm doing this because I love you, as they're hurting you. And then you see it in a story and you're like, it's not really a redeemable quality. Why is that in there? Or wait a minute, why are you not running? That's a very dangerous relationship to be in. So I think that's another really positive benefit of getting the rage out, but using the language to recognize what you've written. And all of a sudden you may have this wonderful story, but half the relationships in there are so volatile, and they're not serving the story. They're just volatile because that's the way the world makes sense to you. And then you have to go back and go, why is this not working with my readers? Why are they so angry about this character and this character? So I read this one book and I was so excited for it. Absolutely excited. It was everything that I wanted in a book, but it was sort of born out of varying cultures that I was not a part of. And by the time I read it, the opening chapter, fantastic. A couple chapters in, there's a woman who's sexually assaulted by a very high official. And I thought, okay, good. Maybe this will set up some kind of a rage scenario, or there will be justice, or, I was kind of excited to see that. And what happens instead is this mistreatment. This woman is dragged by men in front of this official that assaulted her. And instead of letting her say, you fucked up, they don't let her talk. They talk over her about what happened. And they come to an agreement about what happened over her. And she's forced to leave this area. And I thought, okay, maybe we're setting up more of the rage. I'm very angry right now. This is a huge violation. This is a huge mistreatment of taking an abusive situation and writing it, not letting the abuse speak, basically shutting them down one layer after another. And I thought, okay, maybe this is just setting up her rage. Maybe we're about to go postal, and I'm okay with this. The next scene, she dies.
Oh my goodness.
She never gets a voice. The mistreatment, it stopped me right there. I could not read further. And again, this is like a huge book, and I would never call out the author. It was just the scene itself was such a violation. It brought out so much rage in me because, when you have stuff happen to you, even if it's just gaslighting or somebody constantly trying to say, oh, you like this, don't you? You like this, don't you? And trying to manipulate you into liking that thing because they like it, even though you don't give a damn about it at all. It is violating, stripping away somebody's voice, stripping away their ability to fight back, stripping away, and it happens so much in real life that when you put it in your stories, you have to give that person a voice to be able to fight back. Obviously, unless you're telling a memoir of what happened, a real story. But even then, and I think that happens to a lot of us. And that's why it was so, I don't want to use the word triggering, but it was so triggering because, so many of us are without a voice during these scenarios. So,
Yeah. I go ahead.
I was just going to say that I feel like when it comes to that sort of story, I think so. Like I said before, there's never a reason why you have to go and publish or produce your work for anyone else to see. But I do think that when you are going to, there is a responsibility involved in that. That your first draft, as speaking as an editor here, your first draft, that is when you can dump all that rage out, and you don't have to think, or all of those complicated emotions, and you don't have to think about what that means for your characters or why that that person's doing that. Your first draft is how you get out your story. But when you are going back over in edits, I think that if you are going to publish a work, there is a responsibility involved to your audience to make sure that you're not putting bad, not that you're not telling about bad events, because I feel like it's important to represent bad events, but like you were saying, Kasey, not Kasey, Kat, wrong person, erasing the voice of the victim and not letting them get any kind of, not even revenge, but retribution, justice, anything. It's irresponsible as a publication.
I think that's a really important point. I guess the thing is that when I sat down to write the memoir, I had no intention of writing a memoir. It wasn't something I said, oh, I'm going to sit down and write a memoir. I've always written fiction. And even though a lot of times I incorporate historical events into the fiction that I write, it was never on my radar to write about things that were so personal. And I think that, yes, the three of us are writers. We love the craft. We love to be able to, develop characters and storylines and all those things. But I think the benefit of writing to heal is also that it's a way that you can self-reflect. When you start rereading what you've written, there is so much power in that because you have that voice that Kat was talking about, that was erased in a novel that she was reading. Nobody's going to erase your voice when you sit down to write to heal. You have the right to write anything that you want, even if it's like 5 pages of swear words, and I can give you a list. So it's or a couple lists. All right, let's be honest.
I would
I
like
can write a
to.
Bible. I can give you a whole Bible. But the bottom line is that if you're writing to heal, read back your work and identify the themes within it. Like there were so many themes within the first draft that I was just amazed. I'll give you an example. It's like isolation. I didn't have that vocabulary to talk about isolation, but I realized in rereading things that my husband always tried to isolate me, and he would isolate himself and make me feel like if I wanted to socialize with friends or whatever, that I was being a terrible wife and mother. But until I started rereading some of the things that I wrote, I didn't have the ability to self-reflect on that and say, what is this? Why would he do that? And that's a really, really prominent factor in abusive relationships, because what they want to do is they want to keep you from comparing notes with other people or whatever. There were just so many things that came out of that first draft. And by the time I think it was like the second or third draft, I think there were 15 of them in total. But I finally realized I was abused. I finally acknowledged and had the sense that what I was experiencing was not just a bad marriage, it was an abusive marriage. And I could finally acknowledge that by the end. So, regarding healing, it just gave me an absolutely wonderful way to explore my own feelings and thoughts in a very safe environment.
Acknowledgement is really a powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
I remember years ago, I was fortunate enough at the time to be working with a therapist who was barely holding me together. But she, you know, her and I talked, and she knew I was a writer, and she goes, "Okay, let's try an exercise." And she said, "I want you to outline your life as if you're writing a book. So think about like these critical moments in your life and just write it in an outline." Now, when I was 19, I got in a car accident. I ended up slamming into a mountain, flipping about a half a mile down the road, and lost all of my childhood memories. Um, and so the interesting thing is, as I started writing this outline, I had sectioned it into kind of childhood, and then I don't remember how I sectioned the rest of it, but the first act was just kind of childhood to high school. And as I started just thinking about things I hadn't thought about in years, you know, you kind of unthread one off your brain and two more pop up. So I started thinking about these things that had happened, just this overall arching thing. By the time I got to about 10th grade, I stopped. I couldn't write anymore. I was an absolute wreck. And the next time I talked to my therapist, I'm like, nope, we're not talking about, we're done. Because I had started remembering. And there was a lot of shit in there I had no idea was there. I mean, it was really buried. But it got me thinking, you know, what if I had been talking to her? I would have nobody to tell this to. And would I want to keep writing and potentially cracking myself open to this point where I become a slobbering mess? Or is it time to seek professional help? And I think that's one of the things that we want to kind of touch on is writing to heal is fantastic, but it's not the only expression. And sometimes you have to look at what's happening and how it's affecting you and go, oh, okay, wait a minute. I need to slow this down. I need to use a self-care kit, or there's so much more going on here that I might need someone who's a little bit more of a professional to kind of walk me through the steps and help me know when to back off, when to push forward, and when to just grab Kasey's little compendium of all the swear words in the universe and, you know,
Go for it.
just go for it.
So I've got a story I don't think I've shared with you guys actually. So that's odd because we've been working so closely together and I just realized now. But so when I was 15, I had spinal surgery. And because I have scoliosis. So I had my entire spine was grown at 42-degree curve angles, and one on each level, top and bottom. So I needed my entire spine reconstructed. When I found out, I was terrified, and I have severe anxiety. And heard that, no, don't worry, my doctor tells me, he's like, there's a 99% chance of complete survival, and you know, like the surgery goes perfect, 99%. So I wrote a short story once called 1%, and it was because my entire, I think they told me in August, and by November I was having the surgery. That was not fast enough for Justine. Teenage Justine did not handle that well, because that was more than enough time to ruminate on what happens to the 1% that is not part of that 99%. And I sat on that and I drove myself kind of nuts. I mean, I was like a completely different student. I was a completely different person during that period waiting for my surgery. I swore I was not getting out of there alive, or I was going out in a wheelchair. Swore. Now, like, other later disabilities aside, I'm not in the best shape by this point in my life, but I did get through that surgery and I was okay. Traumatized as hell, but okay. Spinal wise. And I wrote a short story about it, or I tried in college, and I wrote it, and it was very clinical. It was, and then I had they had to do this to my back, and they had to do this to my spine. And it wasn't a story; it was just facts that I. And my college professor was like, this is some, like, you're scientifically retelling what you went through. You're not. It's not really a story. And I was like, well, what if I add this? What if I add that? He was like, you need to get deeper. Story didn't get touched. And nope. Couple of years later, I sat down with it, and then I was ready.
Yeah.
And I told the whole story. And it wasn't even just like, yes, I had work to do. And like mental health wise, I needed to see a professional separately for a lot of different things that that was a part of. And so, yes, I did need to take more time doing that before, but that wasn't really even the issue. I just struggled with getting close to that time because I had been there and I never wanted to go back. Opening that wound up, while it didn't send me into, a crisis, it did really hurt. And my brain went, like, it was like hot plate, and you go to touch and you're like, nope, your hand pulls back. It was sort of like that. Like, I would start to get deeper and then I'd like yank back. I was like, I can't, I don't know. I just can't. It took a very long time to get it down. I did. I did publish it eventually. I don't know why I kept wanting to yank at that scab, but I did. I needed to deal with, there were a whole host of other issues going on at the time in my life, but I really wanted to deal with that anxiety of knowing something is coming and having no real way of processing how that will affect you. And no, it's not in your hands. And for somebody like me who, did at the time had nothing in my control for various reasons, that was extremely, that having my own body taken out of my hands as well was terrifying. So while the story did get told eventually, it took a lot of mental work in between. It wasn't like, I mean, Kasey wrote like 100 drafts of that book, but it wasn't a 30,000 word vomit in a night kind of situation. It took a lot of time to get there.
Yeah.
But eventually I got there.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Like, you might put something down and you might step away for months, for years, and come back and go, I think I'm ready now to do it.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Because the thing is that sometimes we don't even know until something happens that we have these little things that just make us crazy. Like, Kat, can I tell him about secretary?
Yes, please.
So one thing I do want to make a point is that, like, we actually spoke about this before the panel, but we have to inject humor into some of this, because if not, we will completely lose our minds. So hence our laughing over a very serious topic. But go ahead.
But it's yeah, and it is important to laugh, like, not only about situations but at ourselves. And this is one of those things where I didn't even realize how much of a button was being pushed one day when Kat joked about being a secretary and me, because that was something that my husband told me. I mean, I was a professional. I worked in the film industry. I made a lot of money, and yet he was gaslighting me and telling me that I had never had any real responsibilities, that I was just a glorified secretary or an admin person. So when Kat was joking about it, I swear to God, I wanted to reach through the computer and just strangle her, because it just brought back this, just even that word. When I hear it, there's nothing wrong with being a secretary. It's just, it was his way. The meaning to him was very, very demeaning. what he was doing was demeaning me by gaslighting me. And it just so happens when that whole situation happened, I had all of these invoices that I had in a banker's box, and it was just pure coincidence. And I started pitching them at him because they were worth a lot of money. I was making a lot more than a secretary. But when she said that, like, it again, it was just like this really bad trigger. And I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes when you are writing, you are going to uncover things that are very uncomfortable, like Justine was saying. And if you can't handle it, don't worry about it. This is just for you. You know, it might take you a long time to, get through the process of writing a particular part of a story, or you might just like put it away and say, this is not what I want to write about. There is no right or wrong way to write to heal. You are the captain of your own ship when it comes to that. And you can make those choices to write about it or not write about it. Because if something is so triggering, you might not be in the headspace or the emotional space to cope with consequences, that it opens up all of these really, really bad feelings. And maybe you're at a point in your life that you're not ready to deal with it. And like Justine, you were ready in the future, but if you're not, don't beat yourself up about it.
And
And
I think,
also, I
sorry.
you want to go in first?
Sure. I was just going to say, having those trigger words is also part of the language. It's a really critical part, because when it happened, I was making a very innocent joke. I had never heard Kasey mention anything about secretary, but stepping into her shoes, I understand why she got so angry that day, and and the events that happened afterwards.
Meanwhile, works for a living as an executive assistant is sitting here like,
It was,
I wasn't offended. I'm just kidding. No.
it was one of those things where I was so grateful that she came forward, because sometimes people say things and we get so angry and we're like, why are we so angry? We really do have to write about it, talk about it, art about it, unpack it. But sometimes we're on the other side. We say something totally innocent and the other person is like, fuck you, fuck. And you're like, what the hell just happened? Like, these are very general words.
Yeah, there's a part of that that really helps you understand that other person if you take that opportunity.
Yeah.
To learn about. You can get offended that they got mad, or you can go, okay, what's going on? That isn't
Yeah.
And that kind of communication, I mean, this is what bonds the three of us. We've had moments like that. We've had good moments. We've been able to work through them because we had to take a minute and go, hey, you good? Because that was a weird answer. What just happened there?
Why are you ready to slap me?
You just wrote fine in a way that didn't sound fine. You good? But one of the things I did want to say is that I think an important thing also to consider when you're doing this is that we're talking about a lot of really heavy stuff that needs to be recovered from. But this isn't the trauma Olympics. Like, we've all got things that hurt us or have been, have stick in our heads that might not be as serious as abuse or, medical trauma or all of these things that we've been describing, but get to us and bother us. It could be elements of a breakup. It could be, a bad friend. It could be, anything that you just feel like you need to get out of your system in some way. Writing to heal can help it. It doesn't have to be something that's super dark and deep. It can go as deep as you need it to be. But I feel like it's also important to say, like, this is something you can use to help you through things like, discomfort over a discussion or what you wish you could have said in a situation. I've done that before. I've written out, I've had arguments and then I've come back and I've been like, and what I actually said was just to get it out, just to be, I was way cleverer in that moment, then, in this moment that I'm writing right now, I'm way cleverer than I was when I had to think about it off the top of my head.
Right.
Definitely better about writing things than I am about coming up with them on the fly. But that's, even if you have to do one of those, like pull out a
Yep.
piece of paper and go, this is the way I wish that conversation would have gone,
Mhm.
and get it out. It's so helpful. It's a weight off your shoulders, and then you never have to look at it again.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
really don't. You can
Burn
just
it.
like shove it in a drive somewhere, or like we were talking about, Kat, burn it.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what I ended up doing with my journals, because I just kept on going back and it was like they weren't serving a healthy purpose anymore. I had recovered all of these memories through reading my journals and emails, and I wanted to be very, very accurate when I was writing the memoir. So there wasn't, any chance someone could say, well, that didn't happen. Because writing a memoir, when you're putting things out there and your memory could be totally different than somebody else's, I wanted to make sure, especially since my husband wasn't alive, that I was telling as accurate a story as possible. But once you get it out of your system, you don't need to hang on to it. You can get rid of it and just kind of breathe and let it go. I mean, which is a really important part of our program, is being able to process all these emotions and then just letting them go. You don't have to keep on reliving it and reliving it. Um,
so yeah, I don't know. Did we miss anything?
um,
Well, Kat, if you are talking, you are on mute, and so no one is hearing you.
can we just like tell people a little bit more about what we're doing and why we're doing it? Because if there's anybody out there that's listening to us, which I hope there are a lot of people out there that are going to listen to this, um, because we have such a unique set of experiences, and because we're all writers, that is really our superpower. We can envision and imagine what people need to heal in a way that's probably a lot different than maybe other programs or other resources. So if you're looking for help in this area, you can go on our website, which is iknowwhyshe.org. We also have an annual event that we do called Authors Against Abuse, because we're all authors. And it's part of why we love the Write Hive community, because it gives people an opportunity to express and promote their work that you might not find in the mainstream. So writing to me is and has been a lifeline. It's been that thing, that constant thing that got me through some really, really dark moments. So, you know, that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Speaking as a representative of both Right Hive and this, I think one of the reasons I thought this presentation would be really important to have on Right Hive specifically is because we work for those that are underrepresented, and we want to help them get their stories out. And there's so much unfortunate trauma that underrepresented and marginalized people go through just living their lives, that I felt like this would be a really good use of what we're learning and teaching to the world, to our specific niche that we are working with, but that anyone that has been through any kind of trauma could potentially use and benefit from, because I always tell Kasey, like, we're starting here. We want to help women or we want to help people that have been abused. Unfortunately, that I say women because gets really heavily weighed on women. The large majority are, but anybody who has been through abuse, we wish to help, and so that's where we're starting. But I always say to Kasey, we start there, and then we take over the world. Uh, we want to keep, we want to keep figuring out who else that we can help and how else we can spread this. And so, you know, we really want, I figured it would be a great use to other marginalized communities who are, especially nowadays, in this year, 2025, feeling specifically traumatized and targeted, and to give them a way to help get that out and process that, especially with the shortage of mental health resources and that, you know, and medical access. You know, we thought it would just be a good way to you know, give people something that they can use, that they don't have to pay an exorbitant amount of money for, that they can, you know, hopefully help process some of what they're going through.
I came across a quote today that really resonates with me as we're moving more and more into our organization, and we're meeting so many people that really resonate with our cause, um, to change the narrative around domestic abuse, because a lot of people still believe in the myths that it's very easy to leave a domestically abusive relationship. And I was one of them. I was one of those people that, you know, if you had told me when I was in my 20s and 30s that I would ever end up where I am right now, I would have laughed you out of the room. You know, it's just not going to happen. And it happened. And people don't understand why people stay. And the largest connection between why people stay is because they can't afford to leave, or they're afraid to leave. You know, you don't want to sleep in your car with your kids and your dog or cats, or, you know, maybe a grandmother. You're afraid that you might be, you know, cut off from your medical things or food, or there's so many reasons why people stay, but so much of it has to do with financial abuse.
And
And
also the coercive control that makes people feel that they can't operate, or they need the other person to, you know, like what you were saying about the secretarial situation. That whole
yeah,
thing was your husband trying to make you feel like you couldn't do anything on your own. And after you hear that over and over and over again, a lot of times that's enough to make you go, well, if I leave, how will I rebuild my life? I don't have the skills to do this. I'm just me. And when someone keeps pushing you into that,
mhm.
you know, then you don't know that you can get out and be strong on your own, because you've been pushed into this, you know, uncomfortable box for so long that you fit it now, or you think you do.
He actually said that to me one time. He said, I'm going to end up having to take care of you for the rest of my life. And the irony was that for the first 12 years of our marriage, we didn't have children, and I was the breadwinner, and I took care of
What I
him.
want to, you know how I want to answer that, right?
I do. Yeah, but you've sworn enough. I'm sorry. But all right, if you have to, go
My
ahead.
answer to that is you ended up taking care of him for the rest of his. But anyway,
Yeah.
um,
But
and it didn't take long. Anyway,
too long. But the thing that I just wanted to say, which like I tend to like kind of almost latch onto sayings because it's a good way for me to kind of get out of the headspace that I sometimes get into. It's very, very easy sometimes to fall back into believing the language, and believing the narrative of your abuser. And one of the things that my husband used to say to me all the time, you know, besides, oh, you're lazy, you're this, you're that, you know, he used to say, you know, you're such a dumbass. And those words come out of my mouth about myself sometimes because I heard them for so long.
yeah,
So
we regularly scold her for them.
yes, they do. And they get,
Like, not a dumbass.
yeah, not a dumb. So I tend to latch on to quotes and things that are very positive. And one of the people that I absolutely adore, and she was really actually part of The Color of Frost, because The Color of Frost is written like, it's historic fiction and it takes place in 1974, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg was just starting to really become a big deal then. And so this meant a lot to me, and I hope it means a lot to you. But anyway, it says, fight for the things that you care about. Do it in a way that will lead others to join you. And to me, that's what we're all about. We're not telling you exactly what you need to do. We're telling you about our experiences and what has happened to us. And if you join in the way that we've approached this, it will give you an opportunity to heal the way that we have. So that's why we're so passionate about what we're doing.
I think that um I'm pretty sure that I speak for all of us when I say our doors are generally open. Any place, I'm all over social media all the time. I'm kind of a social media junkie, but that's besides the point. But you can find me on everything except for X, because I don't touch that anymore. But
Call it
if
by its real name, shitter.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can find me on all of those sites as I'm actually both. I am me, Justine Manzano, Justine _ Manzano everywhere, but I'm also I Know Why She Stayed everywhere. I run our social media accounts. If you ever need my door and our contact email, which is on our website, iknowwhyshe stayed.org, our doors are open. And so if you're not sure how to do this writing to heal thing, and obviously we have the Q&A coming up after this, but I just want to say, feel free to reach out, talk to us. If you want to tell us your stories, we're here, we have an ear, we're willing to listen.
It's awesome on our website. Like if you just want to write down your story just so somebody else hears you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to, like, we don't have to use it for anything, or you can let us know that, like, but or if you want to share publicly, like anonymously, we could also help that. Like, if you ever want to come to us with anything, I guess I'm just saying the door is open. We're here for you guys. We do want to support in any way, and even if it is not about an abusive situation, if you want to learn more about writing to heal, if you want to talk to us about our experiences, we're here, and the door is open. So you can find us on all of the on our website, iknowwhyshe stayed.org. You can find us on all those socials. You'll get me, but I can always direct you to them if you would rather talk to one of them. Just let me know. So yeah, I
KJ
think that
requires a sacrifice of tacos if you want.
if you want, yeah, if
If
you
you
want
want the KJ advice,
yeah,
Yes.
KJ advice
be
requires
prepared with
a dragon
sacrifice.
picture or tacos.
Okay.
That is
And
true.
with me,
Please.
it's puppies or kittens.
Puppies or
I
kittens,
mean, I'm just,
chocolate.
yep. Yeah. And
So
also
what-
let people know, I'm sorry, Kat. I just wanted to say that, like, if you really are, if you want more information about our stories, the memoir and our reader's guide are for sale. And that, like, any sales that we make help us promote our program so that we can provide the program for free to victims, because we know people that are in financially abusive situations, they sometimes can't even afford to buy a book. And we are in a few libraries. So,
We're also working on ways to provide with this as part of our program, to provide these reading materials in the program in a way that is not traceable, like is not a big book, but is discreet. So we have ways to hide the program and
ways
things
to
like
make you
that.
talk.
All yeah, all things that we can talk to you about on the site if you need the program. But just, something I wanted to let you know, like if like you were saying, Kasey, if you purchase anything from us, we can also, that'll help us fund those products, go or make a donation or anything like that. It helps to fund those products going to people who need it, who can't afford it.
So I just want to leave everyone with the final thought. If you are out there and you're feeling like you don't have a voice, or you're feeling like your situation is so rare and unique that nobody would understand, or you're just feeling alone, you know, talk to us. You're not alone. So writing can be a very lonely sport. So it's, you know, sometimes when you're writing all of that rage, you need to be by yourself because you need to be fully unlocked and just get it all out in the weirdest possible way. But sometimes you just need somebody to hold your hand and say, look, I'm here. You're not alone. So just know that you're not alone. You can reach out to us anytime, even if you need some prompts. If you want a writing buddy, I'm absolutely happy to sit on Zoom with somebody and not talk and just write for an hour. And that way you can just, you know, bang the desk with your pen or however you want to write. Anyways, I am KJ Harrowick, and you can find me on all social media at KJ Harrowick. My website is kjharrowick.com. And, or if you want to come through, I Know Why She Stayed, you can just ping Justine with your tacos. So.
And we will have all of those links for you in the chat. Please drop all of your questions, anything you have about Writing to Heal, and enjoy the rest of Write Hive 2025. Thanks for coming.